Hi students, this video is an introduction to your essay 4 assignment, your research essay. It's the last take home, well actually that's not true, you'll have a brief final exam essay that will be a take home essay, but this is the final essay in the sequence of essays 1 through 4. And it's a research paper, which I know can, saying those words can cause stress. I've learned that some of the other faculty in English don't even call it a research paper because it's so stressful for students to hear that phrase. But I'm here to tell you this assignment can be fun. It's totally doable. I will help you every step of the way. So take a deep breath. And you know, you'll hear me give this advice a million times more, but I just want to remind you that the key to succeeding on any big project in college is to just keep focusing on the next step. You don't think of the whole thing at once. You just think, okay, I've got to do this first, turn that in. I've got to do this second, turn that in, and just keep focusing on the next due date. And if you do that, by the final due date, you'll have a paper. So here we go. So what I want you to do with this assignment is research a social issue related to literature we have read this semester. So I'm thinking about things like unions, and I'm trying to remember some of the other ones that I refer to in the suggested topics. Resilience, sexism and racism. All of these are things that come up in the works we have read this semester. And so I sort of feel like the works we've read have sort of raised questions about these issues. Some of the works we've read were written hundreds of years ago. And so I'm kind of thinking about the relevance of these literary works. Are the issues that they raise in these works, are these issues still pressing in our society? And what might this writer say about the state of this issue today? So I'm just trying to kind of help you connect some of the social issues raised in these works of literature with issues today. Okay, so a few basic things. You need to do outside research, which means at least 6 outside research sources, which you can find through the GCC library. And I'm going to remind you how to do that, though I think you've all taken your library workshops by now, so you may have an idea. You could also use reputable websites. But be careful, because as you know, the internet can be kind of the wild, wild west. And it's important that you choose sources that have been through some sort of fact-checking process. At least one of your sources should be a primary source. So a primary source is a first-person account. So for example, if you're writing about sexism in the LA Firefighters Union, which has been an issue in the last decade, you should have someone's personal account of being in the Firefighters Union and witnessing sexism or not witnessing it, or somebody who was there. One of the other topics you might write about is union and union busting. So you might have a first person account from somebody who says, maybe somebody from Amazon saying, we let everybody vote on a union and it was no problem and we didn't do any union busting. Or you might have a first person account of somebody who says, I worked at Amazon in Alabama and they tried to keep us from starting a union. So those are first person accounts. The central question you should explore in this essay is, to what extent is this social issue raised by a work of literature we read still important today? If it is no longer important, explain why. If it's still important, explain why. It's perfectly okay and encouraged to say it both is and isn't important, or that the issue has changed, and to explain how it's changed. It all depends on what you find in your research. I want to just kind of remind you that, when you do research, sometimes you discover that an issue is more complicated than you expected it to be. And in a way, that's great, because that gives you a lot to write about and explain. This is I think it's a 6 to 8 page paper. I'm just double checking. Yeah, it's a 6 to 8 page paper, not counting the works cited page. So you want, material. You want to have stuff that you have to explain and give details about, so that you'll have a 6 to 8 page paper. Okay, so just a reminder about sources. It's extremely important that you not just do a Google search to find your sources for this essay. I'm going to take a sip of coffee. One of the points of this assignment is to empower you to learn how to do good research and find sources that are valid and have good, accurate information. And the best way to do that is through a database. A database is just a collection of materials that have been published and have gone through some kind of editorial process. So, for example, when the New York Times or the LA Times or the Washington Post or the Wall Street Journal, when those newspapers write, when people write for those newspapers, everything in the articles that are about to be published is checked for accuracy. There are literally people who are called fact checkers who check the facts in those articles. So when something is printed in the New York Times or the Washington Post or the Wall Street Journal or the Orange County Register, that the facts in those publications have been checked. That's what an editorial process is. That doesn't mean that they don't make mistakes, because they do. They often have to print corrections, but there's been a process. If I had the skills to make up a web page, I could put up a web page today that says the moon is made out of cheese. And I could make it look really scientific, and I could say things like, this Nobel Prize winning astrophysicist has proven that the moon is made out of cheese. And I could make it look really academic. And if I was really savvy with technology, I could maybe even make it the first thing that comes up in a Google search when you typed in, what is the moon made out of? So often, I think you all know, I certainly know that often we can get good information on the internet. We can often Google something, what did I Google yesterday? I feel like, how old is, Sonia Sotomayor? You can Google that and you probably get an accurate answer, because it's kind of common knowledge. It's in a lot of places. However, if you're Googling something about which people debate, about which people have strong opinions, you're less likely to get accurate information unless you go through a database. And we all want good, accurate information, right? So the good news is, and I'll go into this in another video, is doing a search in a database just takes about 3 more steps than doing a Google search does. So it's not that much harder, especially since we have access to the GCC library databases. So please keep all that in mind when you're looking for your sources. And there will be a lot of videos about how to look for sources, how to write a works cited page, how to do an annotated bibliography. I'm going to walk you through every single one of those steps. Okay, but the first thing you need to think about is what you might write about. And you are welcome to pick a social issue not represented in the suggested topics on this assignment page, but please run it by me first. But I've discovered over the years that students really like some specific suggestions. So that's what I'm giving you, are some specific ideas. And in a lot of cases, I picked these topics because I know that you can find sources on them. And I'm always happy to help you find sources. Okay. Here's a topic. In SWET, we see how unionized workers are affected when a factory takes its jobs overseas and the union cannot help its workers. But many companies want to keep their factories in the US, but don't want to have unionized workers. Lately in the US, workers trying to form unions in order to be able to fight for better, that should say pay, not way better, it should say better pay and benefits, have been victims of union busting efforts by companies such as Amazon, Target, and the New York Times. Research and write about union busting efforts and how such efforts might relate to the problems faced by the workers Lynn Nottage writes about in SWET. Some search terms you might try in a database are Amazon and Alabama union vote. I would do more than just Amazon. I think I would do Amazon union vote, Amazon union busting, any of those might work. Also, John Oliver has a show, I think it's called This Week or something on HBO. He recently did a long segment on his TV show, which you can use as a source about union busting. And there's a link there to that if you want to check that out. Another topic related to SWET is many of the characters in SWET, when faced with losing their livelihood and no way to keep making a living, fall into drug addiction and cannot cope. But at the end of the play, Cynthia, Jason, and Chris are all taking steps to build new lives. The quality of finding a way to continue and rebuild in the face of enormous challenges is often termed resilience. And it's a term that's been talked about a lot during the pandemic because we all need an incredible amount of resilience to get through the pandemic, right? So there's a lot of interesting research about what scientists have learned about how to develop resilience and encourage it in others, and you could research that. Another topic related to SWET and resilience is shame. Evan, the parole officer in SWET, you might remember this, says, you know, as he's trying to help Chris and Jason kind of rebuild their lives after prison, he says that shame is kind of the most pernicious, the most, you know, is the biggest threat to rebuilding their lives. And I think that's what leads them to go face Oscar and Stan, is because they realize they have to, that's the way they have to fight their shame, is to face what they've done and acknowledge it. And so maybe that's the beginning of a renewal for them. So another thing you could research, there's a lot of really interesting research on the relationship between shame and drug addiction, and you might look into that. What does the research show about what shame is and how it can negatively affect our ability to heal and move forward after traumatic events? And what does the research show about how to deal with shame? There are a couple really good TED Talks by a researcher named Brene Brown, and I left a link to them there. Brene Brown is a psychologist, and you could definitely use her TED Talks as sources. I've got another one related to SWET. In SWET, Oscar implies he and his father are not allowed into the union because of racism. Research and write about the history of racism and sexism in unions. There's been a really interesting controversy going on in LA in the last decade. There have been a lot of accusations of sexism in the LA Firefighters Union. And the Los Angeles Times has covered that pretty thoroughly. So you could probably find a bunch of articles about that. They did, I know just recently, the new head of the Firefighters Union, I believe is a woman. I think I have that right. I might be wrong. I don't know if she's the head of the fire department or the firefighters union. I'll have to check. But anyway, there are a lot of articles written about that. I gave you a link to one here if you want to check that out. In What the Living Do, this is another topic. Marie Howe writes about how it's more in the video we watched about AIDS. There was a lot said about maybe how homophobia prevented the healthcare system from responding quickly to the AIDS crisis. And there's been a lot of talk about the role bias plays in healthcare in the last couple of years, particularly during the pandemic. So there was an organization called ACT UP that developed out of the AIDS crisis in the 1980s. There's some really good articles in the New York Times in the last couple of years about the role ACT UP played in finding good treatment for AIDS. It was dealt with a little bit in the video we watched. What does the data show about the ways racism affects healthcare and what steps are being taken to make healthcare more equitable? There's been a lot written about whether racism is a factor and why more people of color are dying from COVID-19. Any of those could be good topics. Many of the works we've read this semester have dealt with death and have encouraged us to look at death not as something scary and dreadful, but as something that we might face with courage, peace, and even curiosity. There is a movement, the hospice movement, that has kind of the same goal. It encourages, it used to be the idea was in a hospital that when somebody was dying to kind of keep them alive no matter what. The hospice movement got very interested in if we know somebody's definitely dying, do they have to be in a hospital where they're going to get woken up 4 times in the middle of the night or something? Could we let them die at home? Could we keep them comfortable? Could we give them a chance to think about how they want to die, whether they want to be at home or elsewhere, whether they want to be with their loved ones, whether they want to stay alive at any cost, or whether they want to stop treatments at a certain point and just be kept comfortable. The hospice movement really brought up this idea of a good death and empowering people to decide how they want to die, which is, was just a radical idea. So, but I think that's very similar to the way some of the literary works we read that said, what if we thought about death in a different way? I'm thinking particularly of John Donne saying, "Death, you're not so mighty and dreadful. We got this." So you might look at that. Next week, we're going to read a very famous and wonderful essay by the writer Virginia Woolf about how basically we don't have a lot of, in her time, which was around the early 20th century, there was not a lot of great literature written by women. And she talks about how that has everything to do with how women did not have their own money. They did not have a room of their own to write in. They did not have the resources they needed to create great art. So there are a lot of related social issues to that. You could write about the fight for equal pay for equal work. Women still make something like 80 cents to the dollar that men make. You might investigate the term rape culture and what it means. You could also connect a paper on rape culture to His Coy Mistress, to My Last Duchess. You might also connect rape culture, To His Coy Mistress, My Last Duchess, any of those, to the case of Chanel Miller, who was raped. She survived rape by a guy who's sometimes called, Brock Turner is sometimes called the Stanford rapist because he got a very light sentence. She has a very powerful victim impact statement that you can see at this link, that really details sort of how rape victims are treated, and what is problematic about that. And that might be something you can connect to His Coy Mistress, My Last Duchess, or Virginia Woolf. Again, Virginia Woolf's essay says we're not going to have true equality until women and men, and by extension, people of color, all have the same access to resources. If we all had the same access to resources, we could be equal. But as long as there's racism and sexism, paying people of color less, paying women less, we're not going to have true equality. One recent development in our country has started to address this idea of equalizing resources, and that is the recent movement to work towards a universal basic income. Andrew Yang talked about this in his presidential run. And the way it's been experimented with, there was a very famous study in Stockton, California, where they selected people who were very low income, and they just gave them $500 a month, no strings attached. And the idea was to see if people just had a little bit more help, if people who, had very little money were just given a little bit more every month, could they sort of help themselves? And the study found, yes, that it made a big difference. Some of those people, because they had $500 more a month, they could take an Uber to a job interview and get a better job, or they could take a day off work and look for a better job. It gave them so many more options. And so you could research the Stockton study. It's now being replicated in other places, including in Los Angeles. I'm not sure what stage that the Universal Basic Income program in Los Angeles is at right now, but there are a lot of articles available about it, I think mostly in the Los Angeles Times. I gave you a link there to the information about the Stockton study. So you could write about the Stockton study and how it's being replicated in other places. There's a lot to write about there. Anyway, those are some ideas. I'm happy to get together with you and hash out some others. I just want to say, while this assignment is designed to give you some freedom in the selection of your topic, whatever topic you choose, you should design an essay that in some way explores a social issue raised by a work of literature we have read, and discuss whether that social issue is still important today, or if it is, in what ways is it important? In your essay should also draw connections between what you learned from your research and the work of literature we read that connects to the social issue you are writing about. I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to not have a lot of preconceived ideas when you start this essay. Resist the urge to pick a thesis before you even done any research. Like, oh, I know what I think about racism, and I'm going to have this thesis, and now I'm going to go find articles that fit or support that thesis. I've seen again and again that is really not a great way to work. It is much better, and I think much more fun and much more effective to get on the database. And again, I'll have a video about how to work on the database. In fact, it's in this week's module. Go into the database, just explore, take some time, look at all the different articles, see what you find, see what's interesting to you, and let yourself learn from the things you read and form your thesis and what you want to write about based on what you've learned. This is just a great opportunity to kind of rummage around in the database and find out about research and issues that maybe you know nothing about. So enjoy that process. Then after you've found some articles that are really interesting to you and you found a topic you really want to pursue, read all those articles and then maybe write a tentative thesis about what you've learned about the topic. So your essay should have an introductory section with a clear thesis statement. Again, do your research first. Distinct supporting sections with clear topic sentences which support your thesis with specific details to support your points. It should have some quotations from your outside sources followed by in-text citations. Remember that since this is a 6 to 8 page essay, it is not a 5-paragraph essay. So your supporting sections may be several paragraphs long, and the supporting sections don't need to be the same size. You may have 5 paragraphs of details and explanations about one supporting point, but only 3 paragraphs about another. That's fine. A concluding section in which you discuss the implications of your research and what you've written about it, and a works cited page. And obviously, since this is a research paper, you don't have a works cited page, you do not have a research paper, and I will not grade it. So I will show you how to write a works cited page. If you're struggling with it, let me know, but you cannot leave it out. All right, so that's a lot of stuff I've dumped in your lap. The next thing to think about or to notice is that your grade on this essay is based on your grades on preliminary work on the assignment plus the quality of the final paper received. So you can't just turn in a paper the last day and, if you get an 86 on it, that's your grade. The grade on your final draft of your essay with your works cited page is only 60% of your grade on this assignment. 40% of your grade on this assignment is based on points you get for taking all these little baby steps leading up to that final essay. So the first baby step is due next Wednesday, May 25th at 11:59. And that's when you're going to turn in your six tentative sources. It could be more than 6 on your topic, including one primary source by next Wednesday at 11:59, May 25th. These sources should be presented in the form of a works cited page. And I will have a video posted that shows you how to put them in the form of a works cited page. You may change those sources after May 25th, but you gotta show me that you at least have started your research. You have some sources you might use. You have some sources that you're looking at. Okay. The next step is going to be to do an annotated bibliography of your sources, which is basically like a works cited page with a summary of each source in your own words. So after you do your works cited page, you're going to read all your sources, and then you're going to tell me what's in them. Well, this, article is about blah, blah, blah. This article says this, and that's going to be due Sunday, May 29th. Then also on Sunday, May 29th, you're going to do a free write and or a list of what you've learned about your topic. And that's informal, just upload it. It's due on the same day as your bibliography. The following Wednesday, you're going to turn in a tentative outline of your essay. We'll talk about that a lot. That same Wednesday, you're going to turn in a typed rough draft of your introductory paragraph in the first supporting section. On Sunday, June 5th, you're going to turn in a complete typed rough draft, including a works cited page. And between June 6th and June 10th, you're required to meet with me about your rough draft and discuss it. And then your final draft is due on Sunday, June 12th by 11:59 p.m. I've got a little typo there too. This paper should be 6 to 8 pages long, not including the works cited page. And then here's the grading rubric, which you should use as a checklist. In on this rubric, I said you should use at least 3 quotations overall. I would say you're probably going to use more than that in a 68-page paper, but we'll talk about that more later on too. So that's the overview of your essay 4. Like I said, deep breath, one baby step at a time. I see it again and again and again. If you just keep, I see students every semester, if they just keep focusing on the next baby step, reach out when they need help. They don't know how to do a step, come to my office hours, let me know what they need help with. I can help. As long as they just keep following step by step, at the end of, I guess we have 3 weeks to do this paper. They have a paper, and no one step was too horrendous because they took all those little baby steps. The rough draft's pretty tough. I won't lie to you about that, but you'll get through it. Let me know how I can help. Let me know if you have questions. You got this. All right, I'll talk to you soon.